Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome on in once again to Inside the Huddle. I'm your host, Lucas Hill. Got a jam-packed show planned for you today. Yes, by the way, I do have a new laptop. I'm extremely excited that I finally have one. It is about time that I got one. And yeah, man, I'm just extremely excited to get up in here and just really discuss. Parker Toon will be here to talk some Oklahoma football for our second team that we will be discussing here on Inside the Huddle. Guys, make sure if you're watching us on Insta or on X, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, or actually just hit that like button. Make sure you repost it to all of your social medias and all of your friends as well. Also, make sure that you are subscribed if you're watching us on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and make sure you like us. Give us a comment as well. Leave down your comments, thoughts, and concerns. As we continue along for our show today. Look, we've got a lot to discuss, ladies and gents. Got to talk about Chip Kelly. He's headed to the Oakland Raiders. What does that mean for Ohio State? And how does Brian Hartline going to step into that role as the new offensive coordinator for the Ohio State Buckeyes? And I think one of the biggest reasons, too, why he's gotten so much praise has just been his ability to – I mean, he's been around the Ohio State locker room for a long time. Here's a guy that was around in Ohio State. He's been an Ohio State guy throughout college as well as throughout his days as a Buckeye wide receiver. Okay, because when you talk about where this team is going to end up in the near future, there is a lot that we really do need to get into. Because Hartline has a lot of experience at that position. And I do think that as a coach, he's bringing a lot of experience. I mean, here's a guy that two-time 1,000-yard receiver with Miami. And he's going into a new career where he's been a great receivers coach, coached up guys like Jackson Smith and Jigma, coached up Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Marvin Harrison, and now he's got another guy in him. So when you talk about all those guys that are combined in that locker room, it is going to be impressive to see what they have in store for the near future. What? Guess it's not in there. All right. Anyway. It's going to be an interesting season for where this team could potentially end up. So I am really excited to see where they do eventually end up. But yeah, man. All right. So one of the great things, too, is that as Brian Hartline comes into that Ohio State locker room, this is something that I think a lot of people were expecting to. I mean, here's a guy that was already the OC before Chip Kelly came in, has to take a step back initially, and then comes back after that first year of being under Kelly. And I think that he gained a lot more than when he initially did after being with all of those guys that you had before and all the elite talent that was in Ohio State as well on the coaching side of things with Kevin Wilson. I think he's going to learn a lot more with I think he learned a lot more and expanded his arsenal on the offensive side of the ball with Chip Kelly in that 1 year than he did all year with Kevin Wilson. And so I think that's definitely going to be to his advantage in how they're going to develop as an elite offense in the future. Because you look at where this offense is, you got a young quarterback coming in Julian Sayin. He's got a lot to look forward to with Jeremiah Smith on one side, with Cornell Tate on the other side. It is going to be an offense that I think a lot of people really need to start paying attention to much more than they really have. I understand that you're going to lose a guy like Will Howard. I understand you're going to lose a lot of guys in the backfield, but there is a lot of talent that remains on this Ohio State side. And I think it's going to come to a lot of people's advantage when you have so much talent in your backfield, in your backyard. Columbus is going to be back in the national championship, and they're going to be back in a position to continue to be an elite level team into not just this upcoming year, but also when you expect everything else to show up. I don't know what's going on with my laptop now, but that was weird. But anyway, if you really consider where this team will end up in the next several years, there's a lot. There is more talent that Ohio State is bringing back, and because of what you have in the portal, you are going to be elite. You're going to continue to be elite. Nothing's going to change for you over the next several years. So if you think that's the case, you're dead wrong. All right. Let's continue along in our discussions. Let's go on over to our good friends over at ESPN. We're going to get into the Greg Brooks situation after Parker leaves. But it definitely deserves talking to. So we'll get into that later on. I'm really excited to get into that, by the way. Let's talk some National Signing Day. Today was National Signing Day. So I don't know if you really could consider today really a big day for signing day. Really, you only had 3 guys that you could pinpoint and say that they were guys to look forward to for NSD. But I will say there were some big moves. Really, that's about it that you could really say was huge for NSD. But again, I don't know if this year's NSD officially is going to get all the hype that it gets, because you're only getting 3 or 4 max. That's going to be big time names that you have to look at this year. And what's going to happen in the years, I think February NSD is eventually going to get abolished because of how many athletes are signing early and how many are enrolling early, especially in the top 300. It's very rare that you see kids nowadays go from signing from February or wanting to sign in December and then pushing it to February. You're not going to see that anymore. Not with the money that comes along with it, not with the circumstances that are behind it, not with the hype that comes along with it as well. So that's going to change. It's definitely going to create a big impact. But here's the final top 10 when it comes to the class of 2025. Dude, LSU kind of fell, but it's not about just the one player that makes you great. It's about the consistency. LSU, Texas A&M, Florida, Auburn, Michigan, Oregon, Ohio State, Bama, Georgia, and then Texas ranks out as the number 1 overall class when it comes to the class of 2025. And when I tell you they got some dudes, they got a lot of monsters up on this roster. So let's kind of go ahead and talk about them a little bit. Justice Terry, everybody knows about him. That was a big commit because a lot of people were expecting for him to potentially go to Georgia, stay in that. I expected it too, but that's a huge get for Texas and a huge get that you needed to get back in December. I know a lot of people were expecting something else. Jonah Williams to me might be the best safety since I think who was the last guy that came through Texas in 2006. I know they had a guy that was really good. Mike Huff is what I'm hearing. A lot of people compare him to is that, look, Huff was a dang good safety, but Jonah Williams just gives you something so much more than what you're expecting. Jonah Williams right now comparing to Kyle Hamilton, the thing about Williams is that he could be playing a hell of a lot more than just safety. He's going to see a lot more than just the safety position. You're going to probably see him switch between safety and linebacker a lot. So I'm excited to see what he brings to the table for the Longhorns. And you pair him along with a guy like Michael Taft, that creates for a dominant duo that we're going to see. Let me turn this fan on because this is freaking hot. But no, I firmly believe and really have a deep understanding that when I look at a team like that when I look at Tennessee, or that, not Tennessee, but when I look at just a team like what you see in Texas that can build through recruiting and what he's been able to do. And I think it's so great that we're seeing all this happen. I am really excited just to see with what the rest of college football is going to get. So we're going to take a quick break real fast. Right back. When you get to the nitty-gritty at the end of the day, NSD at the end of the day is not going to mean much in the class of 2025. You're only going to be worried about with what you get early in the preseason in probably 2000 early in December is where you're going to get the majority of your recruits that eventually come in. Apart from that, that's just about it, to be honest with you. So Parker Thune is going to be coming in about 5 minutes or so. I'm excited to see this. We're going to be really intrigued. He's a guy that covers a lot around Oklahoma, and I've been really excited to talk with him too. I don't know. Parker Thune, who is, by the way, let's kind of check around Oklahoma as well with what they have. Look, I would say that this is another big year for Oklahoma. You pulled in a top 20 class. I think the biggest one, you get Michael Fasusi, the big 5-star offensive lineman from Louisville. And I think that was a big need. I mean, you had to address the offensive line. And when you talk about the monster that he is and the guy that he is going to become in the near future, he has a lot to look forward to with what Oklahoma is going to bring to the table. And I think that the SEC should be scared for a guy like that. I think the SEC in the offensive line room, in recruiting, it is going to be insane. So I do think that it's going to be huge in recruiting wise. But I do think that when you look overall, just at the amount of sheer offensive line talent, you get the number one offensive tackle, him, David Sanders. You talk about Lamont Rogers. You're talking about Jackson Lloyd. Guys like that are staples at offensive linemen, especially at that tackle position. And I think that is so unique, just creating the legacy that they're going to leave behind. So let's briefly talk a bit about Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly, to me, when he went to the Raiders, I think the reason that Pete Carroll hired him is because of what he did this year with the array of talent that's around him. Now, can you get young talent in the draft? Can you get young talent in the NFL, in free agency? Look, it's not going to be easy for the Raiders because of there's just so much that you have to think about and what you're going to see. So let's go ahead. Let's talk some Oklahoma. Parker Toon joining us once again on Inside the Huddle. Parker, what's going on, brother?
Not a lot. How are you, sir?
I can't complain, my man. I cannot complain. Look, make or break year for Brent Venables and company over in Norman, Oklahoma, as we get into team number 2 of our way too early predictions around the SEC. Parker, National Signing Day was today. No real additions needed for the Sooners. They got their 2 outside guys that they've been needing, especially after losing a lot of dudes in the receiver room. You guys obviously get Deion Burks back, but you bring in guys like Emmanuel Choice from Dallas and Elijah Thomas, 2 of the best athletes in the nation. Just talk to me about their impact and what they can create for this Brent Venables team that is obviously needing a prayer at this point going into next year.
Yeah, no doubt. Strong class for Oklahoma in 2025. Not a huge class, and so it doesn't rank very highly across the industry for lack of quantity. But, you bring up Elijah Thomas and Emmanuel Choice. Only 2 takes at wideout for Oklahoma, but they are 2 of the absolute best. Very much a believer that those 2 can contribute immediately, especially Thomas, who hails from Shakota, Oklahoma, about an hour and a half east of Norman. He has already blown it out of the water. I mean, blowing people away in winter workouts and testing sessions for Oklahoma. Athletically, he is the cream of the crop. So there's a lot of belief that a guy like that's going to be able to come in and contribute for an Oklahoma receiver room that's deep, but not terribly proven.
I agree. This is quite a young receiving room. Obviously, you lose a guy like Nick Anderson that goes to Baton Rouge that still has a lot to prove after coming off of an ankle injury. But yeah, I feel like this receiving room still has a lot of questions, but it all stems back to the quarterback play. You guys obviously get in Jackson Arnold, or not Jackson Arnold. You lose Jackson Arnold. Now you bring in Ben Arbuckle. You also bring in John Mateer, one of the best play callers in college football, one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in college football. I was listening to a show earlier, and they were saying, Mike Hawkins was going to create some competition. And look, I'm not saying he won't, but let's just be honest. We all know what's going to happen. When you get an OC and a Q from the same college, we all know what's going to happen. Plugging into this system in Oklahoma with, the lack of depth, what happened last year with the offensive line, how they kind of broke down early in the season. Just talk to me about the impact that Mateer is going to make immediately once he steps foot in Norman, Oklahoma, and in this Oklahoma Sooners offense, and what's to expect from him in the spring.
Yeah, well, quarterback play wasn't very strong for Oklahoma in 2024. I think that's pretty well known. To a certain extent, it couldn't be helped because the supporting cast for whoever Oklahoma's signal caller was, whether it was Arnold or at times during the season Hawkins, it was ravaged by injury. But John Mateer led the FBS with 44 total touchdowns last season. He's a guy that's from Little Elm, Texas, just 2 hours south of Norman, so he gets to come back a lot closer to home. I think the reunion with his offensive coordinator at Wazoo, Ben Arbuckle, is quite significant because he doesn't have to learn anything new. He comes in with a very detailed understanding of the system, everything that he's going to be asked to do for Oklahoma. And obviously, he's incredibly talented. the belief is that he plugs in at Oklahoma. He and Arbuckle plug in together. You're going to be able to overcome whatever personnel deficiencies you still may have offensively. Look at that tight end room. There's a lot of question marks there. Again, receiver, running back. The answers are there, no doubt. There's a lot of good depth. You just don't really know at this point who's going to emerge. But or at least you feel like the quarterback situation, the quarterback position is not one that you're going to have to worry about because Mateer comes in more than capable of helping Oklahoma win football games in 2025, in particular because of his familiarity with the system. It's not going to be a square peg in a round hole. He's going to be very comfortable with everything that he's asked to do for the Sooners.
Do you think he's going to get limited a good bit, especially at the start of the year, especially when you have a young offensive line that's probably going to come in? I know you guys got the number one offensive tackle in the class of 25 that could be a plug-and-play guy in there.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think he's going to be limited by the offensive line. I also don't have the expectation that the number one tackle you referenced, Michael Fasusi, is a plug-and-play guy because very few guys are on the offensive line. I would think the hope is that you can redshirt him. Really, the Sooners just have to get their guys healthy again, which they will. Jake Sexton and Jake Taylor, who opened the season as Oklahoma's two starting tackles, both missed substantial time. And so you're going to get those guys healthy again. Troy Everett started the season on the shelf at center. When he reemerged midseason and got healthy again, at that point, it was kind of too little too late for that Oklahoma offense. But he's been a consistently reliable option. The battle at both guard spots is going to be very, very interesting because Fabechi Wiwu, a former North Texas transfer, is a guy that's an incumbent at one of those spots, but I'm not necessarily handing a job to him. There are some really, really talented offensive linemen that are going to push him for that spot, as well as the other guard spot. Heath Ozida is going to be in the mix. Eddie Pierre-Louis is going to be in the mix. There's a chance the Sooners could slide Taylor back inside to guard and mess around with a guy like Isaiah Autry-Dent or transfer Derek Simmons from Western Carolina at right tackle. So, again, it's kind of akin to the conversation at wide receiver and at running back where you feel confident that the answers are there. You're just not sure exactly what it's going to look like, but it's not a question of whether there is talent there. There's quite a bit of it.
This back seven, especially on Oklahoma's defense, is going to take a hit. You obviously lose Billy Bowman. You obviously lose Danny Stutzman. But you bring back the Bowen twins, Eli and Peyton, who were staples at safety and corner. What has their impact been, especially last year? Because I know I probably didn't get to see a whole lot of Oklahoma, but talk to me about their impact and what they bring to that back seven.
Yeah, they're both incredibly talented. And Peyton had issues staying healthy last year. He was dealing with a nagging ankle injury for much of the season, so didn't feel quite the impact that you maybe expected from Peyton Bowen, but he's one of the most gifted safeties in all of college football when he is at full health, and I expect that you're going to see that from him in 2025. Going to see what he's capable of. Somebody with Thorpe Award ability, if it all breaks right for him. He can be every bit the player that Billy Bowman was, and then some. He's that gifted. And, you look at his younger brother, Eli Bowen, who kind of flew under the radar to an extent as he was overshadowed throughout the recruiting process by his older brother. They're only a year apart, and so Eli's the younger one. He's the shorter one, and so I don't know that he ever really got his due as a recruit, but anybody that watched him play in high school, and I got the chance to watch them both on several occasions, understood that he was not going to be in over his head. As soon as he stepped foot on a college campus, he would be ready to contribute. He was for Oklahoma, worked himself into a starting role by midseason, and for the most part was lights out. His limiting factor is that height. He's only 5'9", and so there are some receivers, if he's matched up with a guy who's 6'4", like for instance, Theo Weiss at Missouri got the better of him on a jump ball in the corner of the end zone in Missouri's 30-23 victory over Oklahoma this past fall, which, that's just going to happen. He's not going to win every single matchup. He's not going to win every single rep, but more often than not, he's going to be able to hold his own against some of the best wide receivers in the SEC. So he is one guy that you can count on, that Oklahoma knows they can count on to be one of their starting cornerbacks in 2025. And you can just kind of forget about his side of the field. It's going to be on lockdown.
Staying on the defensive side of the ball, Brent Venables finally announcing that he will take over defensive play calling. Obviously, it's hard, especially for Oklahoma. You're replacing a pretty solid DC in Zach Alley that's now back with Rich Rodriguez at West Virginia. But it's quite fascinating to me ever since Brent Venables has gotten there. You're now on your third straight OC and your third straight DC, if I stand corrected.
You're correct.
And so you're looking at this, and what do you think made Brent Venables just say, you know what, I am calling defense next year. I don't want to hire a guy that has DC coordinator experience, and I don't want to elevate any of my position coaches as that next DC. What made him just go through that?
The combination of two very simple factors. One, the reality that he knows the defense better than anybody because it's his defense. And so I think there's a part of him that believes, rightfully so, and I believe it, that he is better suited to call the plays in his defensive scheme than any of his assistants would be, as well as the fact that it's a prove-it year for him in 2025 and his entire staff. And so my man, J.D. Piquel, a longtime friend of mine who works at On3 Sports, made a really good analogy. He said, this is the equivalent of Brent Venables calling for the ball in the fourth quarter, because that's what it is for Oklahoma in 2025. It's the fourth quarter. It's crunch time. They have to win. And I think Brent Venables understands that if they're going to win, they have to play very strong defensive football, and he's willing to shoulder the load. And I think that's a prospect that most Oklahoma fans are pretty comfortable with, knowing what he's done in the past as a defensive play caller. And so if it wasn't going to be Jim Knowles, and Oklahoma made a long, hard run at Jim Knowles to try and be their defensive coordinator. After that all kind of fell through and he wound up going to Penn State, it was apparent that, okay, it's going to be Venables' show in 2025, and that's probably for the best.
Do you think that if things don't change, is Oklahoma and the boosters willing to pay the $35 million this year, or do they wait after 26 to pay the $26 million, or do they let it ride out until the end of its extension?
Well, it depends on how things go next year. How much do things change? Because if they go 6-7 again, or 7-6, somewhere around 500, man, it feels like you're kind of in that twilight zone where you don't have objective cause to fire a guy because it hasn't been bad, and there have been things that have happened that are out of his control. But at the same time, it's not the standard at Oklahoma. It's not what people expect. It's not what the fans expect. And so that might be a really tough conversation and a tough ordeal if Oklahoma is somewhere in that 6-7, 7-6 range. You're kind of looking at a scenario like you had this past year with Billy Napier and Florida, where half the fan base probably thinks this is over, let's move on, let's start new. And then half the fan base thinks, no, it's too soon to pull the plug. Let's see what he can do with another year. And with that said, I think 8 wins is enough to secure him another season in 2026. Anything short of that, and you certainly have a conversation on your hands. I mean, if it's just catastrophically bad, they go 3-9, they go 4-8, okay, then you have to make change. I get that. But 8 wins is probably what ensures Brent Venables is back in 2026.
Okay. I want to get your thoughts on this too, Parker. Last offseason, he signs the extension.
Yep.
After one 10-win season. And after 2 years, you're already extending the guy. And I like how you mentioned the tradition at Oklahoma, just the overall history of it as well. You're talking about an Oklahoma team that is regularly expected to contend for Big 12 or now SEC championships, in the past Big 12 championships. Regardless, and you sign a guy that goes 10-3, and you end up basically the second half of the year. What was impressive about them? Your defense was a disaster. Your bowl game was a disaster. You gave a guy an extension because you beat your rival? How does this make any sense? And you look, Parker, you can disagree, and that's fine. They should have never given him that extension. I thought it was a disastrous move. I thought it was a terrible decision. It would have saved administration a lot of money, especially after what you've seen, just the amount of inconsistency. So this is a make or break year, because the administration basically screwed themselves when they said, hey, we're going to give you an extension after just one 10-win season, and you've only been here 2 years. How does that make sense?
Well,
please explain that.
No, it's okay. And I think there's a lot of validity to what you said. I think there are plenty of folks, even diehard Sooners, that would agree the extension was premature. And it probably was. Now, did the administration screw themselves? We don't know the answer yet. They could have. Absolutely. They could have extended a guy that is in over his head as a head coach and is floundering and is well on his way to an early firing and a hefty buyout and a role on somebody's staff somewhere as an analyst. Or it could just as well be the fact that what happened in 2024 couldn't really be helped with as many injuries as Oklahoma had to deal with. It's not indicative of what the program actually is under Venable's direction, and they're going to rebound in a major way in 2025. Either of those things may be true. So I don't think anybody would argue that. Certainly as of right now, that extension looks very premature at best, but let's see what happens in 2025 when you would expect that the ridiculously bad injury luck that Oklahoma encountered in 2024 is not repeated, because chance demands that there be some regression to the mean there. So we'll find out this year, no doubt. I think by the end of the season, we'll have a verdict on on whether that extension was a wise decision or not.
Parker Thune of the Ref joining us here on Inside the Huddle. Really fast, Parker, before we let you go for today, let's look at our schedule for Oklahoma. You start off at Illinois. It's a favorable non-conference schedule for the most part, but the big one there, I think you're going to get an early look at where this team is at when you guys play Michigan. You've got to go up against the number one player in Bryce Underwood. You got a lot of question marks on your defense. How will Brent Venables attack as a new play caller on your defense? Realistic expectations. I said that this was probably a 7-8 win team. I do believe that if you can finish 500 in the SEC, which is not out of the question, I think Tennessee, I think South Carolina, Alabama could be a game that you could steal. Home-wise, LSU, Auburn, Missouri, even a young Ole Miss team. I think that those games could be considered trap. Texas is a question mark, obviously, in the Red River. But realistically, where do you see this team at the end of the year?
Yeah, so if I'm going to glance at this schedule here, I think Oklahoma starts 4-0, clean sweep in non-con. I give them the edge over Michigan because they're at home. If that game was played in Ann Arbor, I would probably go with Michigan. They feel like two teams that are on a similar level. I think the home field advantage helps Oklahoma get over the hump there. If you're trying to pick out SEC wins and get Oklahoma to that 8-win threshold, I think you start with Missouri. That should be a win. Should have been a win for Oklahoma this past year. They managed to choke that one away in Columbia. So that should be a win. I would say Auburn in Norman should be a win, and there's certainly going to be some familiarity with the guy that's trotting out there to play quarterback for Auburn. So you would expect that Oklahoma is going to be well equipped to defend him. South Carolina, once again, should be a win. That is a game that just completely got away from Oklahoma in the first 5 minutes. I mean, it's tough to script a worse first 5 minutes of a football game than the one that Oklahoma experienced in Norman against South Carolina, and it resulted in Seth Luttrell's firing as offensive coordinator. So I get the sense that Oklahoma is going to go on the road, especially with what happened last year in the rearview mirror, and find a way in Columbia, South Carolina. So I like them to win that game. And then looking at the rest of that schedule, I mean, you have to expect it's the SEC, right? It's a meat grinder, ton of parity. There always is. Anybody can beat anybody any given week. And the asterisk with that statement was always, well, besides Vanderbilt, up until this last year when Vanderbilt beat Alabama and proved that they're not the doormat in the SEC anymore. So I think looking at the rest of that schedule, LSU, Ole Miss, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, there's an 8th win there somewhere. I can't necessarily point to the game in particular and tell you, yep, that's a win. But looking at those 5 games, I feel pretty confident that Oklahoma is going to be able to snag at least one of them.
The biggest one I like to see, Alabama. The biggest reason why you guys won it, the option game of Jackson Arnold. Who do you have in? The number one dual threat quarterback in this transfer portal cycle. Parker Thune joining us. Catch him out on the Ref out in Norman, Oklahoma, 12-3. Eastern time, or are we talking Central time?
Central. We're in the Central time zone in Oklahoma.
Parker, appreciate you joining us again. You can follow him at Parker Thune. Covers all things Sooners, recruiting, the portal, also part of Rivals.com as well. Parker, thank you for joining us once again, my man. Have a great rest of the week and have a great weekend.
No problem, Lucas. Take care.
Parker Thune, once again, hopping on with us today, talking some Oklahoma football. Look, it's a lot that we need to get ready for. And recruiting-wise, there is a lot that Oklahoma has been able to exceed. Like you mentioned, it wasn't a lot. It wasn't a big recruiting class. But you look at quality over quantity. And I think Oklahoma has that. When I look at Oklahoma's schedule, I looked at Tennessee and I looked at Bama as your two road games that you could potentially get wins. LSU, to me, I think could end up being one that you could snag. We don't know yet, but it's definitely going to be a very, very interesting next couple of weeks for Oklahoma, and one that you guys will definitely need to stay tuned towards. Let's talk Chip Kelly. I kind of briefly wanted to mention that before Parker came in. Look, you've got a lot of cap space. The second most cap space in the NFL. You've got $92 million in the cap, 85 of which is effective. Active cap spending, you can spend about $184 million. You got 29 of dead money. But I'll say this. You look at 26, you've got the highest, $179 million. 2027, you've got $268 million. That's going to be a lot of money that you're going to be able to get, free up, and be able to spend in free agency. And I think the Raiders have to take advantage of this. You have to be able to find guys. And you have to be able to find these opportunities that are right in front of your freaking face. And if you don't, that's on you. Because if you're unable to have that much success when it comes to the recruiting trail, it's inexcusable. And if you can't have that happen, then I don't know, man. It's just a lot that you need to get fixed, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You brought this many dudes in. You bring in Chip Kelly. You bring in Pete Carroll, who's a defensive mastermind. But how are you really going to do it? You don't want this to be another Sean Payton situation early on in his tenure. You don't want to get behind the eight ball your first 2 years and depend on veteran players to get in. Can you build around young dudes in the draft? Can you build around free agency? Can you do that? By the way, his OC, he said this about his coaching philosophy. My coaching philosophy is very simple. Now 3 words. Just win, baby. Just win, baby. There's nothing better than that. There is nothing better than what he is on right now. All right. Look, Chip Kelly's got a lot of work. At the end of the day, that's all that matters. Is how does Chip Kelly take advantage of what he has in store for this offense? Are you going to have that much success at the end of the day? And if you do, then it's huge. Because you got to look at the free agency. It's most of the team's defensive starters. Adam Butler, John Jenkins, Robert Spillane, Divine Diablo, Nate Hobbs, Marcus Epps. You're going to lose a lot of dudes on the offensive side of the ball. You're going to lose your 2 running backs in Alexander Madison and Amir Abdullah. And I think that's one that you don't really want to lose in Alexander Madison. I think that consistency-wise, I think Madison struggled with that. But I think if you get him behind a solid offensive line, you're going to be able to have success. And I think that's what it all starts with. Andrus Peat is going to be a free agent, which sucks but at the same time, Pete is entering that part of his career where he doesn't have a whole lot longer. He's been dealing with a broken fibula. He had a high ankle sprain. He's had a torn pec. He's got a lot of things that he needs to get cleared up. And if he is able to do that, then if you can bring back a healthy offensive line, then you have some things that you can work with. But the quarterback position is going to be a big one that the Raiders have to consider. Now, when you look at this market, it's not big. I'll just be honest with you. It's not big. So what do you do? Well, what has he done as of now? Cooper Kupp's a free agent. You could probably get him. But when you look at the quarterback, Sam Darnold, that's a big one. We already know about that. Look, Zach Wilson, who's at Denver. You're talking about Marcus Mariota, back up at Washington. You probably don't want to go for him. But overall, this is a really, 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 really slow quarterback free agency class. There's not a whole lot of guys that you could really want. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't either. I know Teddy Bridgewater is a free agent, but can he get into the right system? This is a guy that hasn't been really relevant around that period of football ever since he was a young one. I don't think he will come back, though. I just don't. If he does, it's a shock. I'll be honest with you. But I don't think he'll play in 2024-25. If he does, then it's a shock. But I don't think he'll be coming back anytime soon. Russell Wilson is an interesting one, 36 years old. But if you look at statistics-wise for Russell Wilson, I don't know what to expect from him. But I just don't know if he's going to be able to be that same guy. I think he's entering the twilight of his career. I think it's going to be over very, very, very soon. Sure, he had a great stretch in 2024. 16-5 touchdown to interception ratio, but you never saw the same offensive consistency that you saw from him early on. You just did. And if you want to have any success in Vegas, then you got to be able to develop your guys. I don't think Russell Wilson's going to bring that at the end of the day. As much as I love Russell Wilson, I just don't see it. I just don't see it really happening on a consistent basis. Okay. I've been wanting to get into this for a while, and I've been really, really interested to see. So everybody knows about the Greg Brooks Jr. situation. And if you guys haven't, well, we obviously got to discuss it because this is insane to me, what has been going on recently. And look, I asked Greg this, this is incredible with what he's been dealing with. And I really hurt for the Brooks family and all that they have gone through. And so I'm really, really intrigued with this. So here we go.
Greg Brooks Jr., starting safety at LSU, was at the top of his game. He was captain of the football team, starting 13 of 14 games he played. By many accounts, he was a prospect for the NFL.
I feel like this year is great. We have a better bond throughout the team, and I feel like it's going to be good.
But all that came to a shocking end when a sudden illness took him off the field.
Not only people cannot understand me,
Take us back to September 2023. You learned that your son had a brain tumor.
My question was, why that kid?
Mm-hmm.
Everything that we want our young men to be, this kid signified that.
It was August of 2023. The newly selected team captain said he began feeling dizzy, had a headache, and was nauseous during practice. In a lawsuit he has since filed against Louisiana State University and Our Lady of the Lake Medical Center for negligence, Greg alleges he passed out and then began to vomit minutes later in front of his coaches and athletic trainers. He says he was told by the athletic trainer he had vertigo and was cleared to return to practice. According to the filing, despite continuing to report those symptoms on a daily basis, it wasn't until 39 days after Greg's symptoms began that the team made an appointment with the neurologist who discovered the brain tumor. What did the school or the coaches tell you about what he was going through?
Nothing. The one call that I received was, I need you to get here. Your son is having emergency surgery tomorrow morning.
Were there a point where you were concerned about who was in charge of that decision?
He's at LSU, one of the best colleges in the United States. Would I have ever thought that his best interest wouldn't be at heart? No.
So you didn't seek a second opinion?
No, sir.
Brooks claims the family was led to believe their only option was moving forward emergently with the brain surgery, also alleging the surgeon was not qualified to do this particular surgery, during which Brooks suffered multiple strokes and was left with severe and permanent injuries. What is the first thing that you remember when you came out of surgery?
Honestly,
There's more to it, and I'm going to go find the rest of it because, look, it needs to be talked about. Nobody is really talking about this a whole lot, and it's disturbing that they're not. There really does need to be more talks about it. You know, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's been 3 damn months since this lawsuit came out. It does not make a whole lot of sense. The fact that this has not been talked about more does not seem to make a whole lot of sense. So I'm trying to find the whole video. Here we go. So I'm trying to find the video right now. So shout out to our good friends over at GMA, I guess. Even though I don't really like GMA, but it so doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Anyways, apologies, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to go ahead and print all this out so I can show you guys and then hopefully get the so here it is. Damn printer, bro. Okay, so here it is.
Honestly, I all thought it was fake. Like I was in disbelief.
Felt like a dream.
Yeah, like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from.
After radiation and chemotherapy, Greg, now 23, is cancer-free, but his recovery is far from over. Little Greg, as the Brooks family calls him, has had to relearn how to eat, write, and speak. Why do you want to speak out now, little Greg?
I just want young athletes in the same spot I was. If something is hurting, tell them. And if they don't do nothing but go get your second opinion. Because if I'd known that I wouldn't be the way I am right now.
The disease is not the issue. This is the aftermath of injury from surgery.
You say you haven't heard from anybody from the LSU coaching staff since October of 2023.
Specifically, Brian Kelly. My son almost lost his life, coach. Where were you? Forget about football. Pick up the phone and say you love the kid, man.
At the time the suit was filed, LSU said Brooks remains in our thoughts and prayers. And since the beginning of our agreement with our championship health partner, Our Lady of the Lake, they have provided exceptional medical care for our student athletes in all of our sports. Our Lady of the Lake also said it could not comment on the litigation, but that its neurosurgical team is among the most experienced in Louisiana, and they give our patients the best opportunity for a positive outcome in any circumstance. So what do you want most for him going forward?
I want him to be able to live a productive life, whatever it may be.
And little Greg, for you?
I just want to be normal.
Now, instead of following his father's footsteps into the NFL, Greg Jr. has daily speech and occupational therapy. He's also had an outpouring of love and support from friends and family. And my daughter Isabella, who was also diagnosed with medulloblastoma, the same rare tumor as little Greg, just a month after him. What was your reaction when you saw her story?
And I said, God, my heart went out to you, man. My heart went out to you. And when I seen her come and I seen her walk, I said, that's how my son probably should be. But I knew where he was at that point. He wasn't speaking, he was responding, he wasn't doing anything. I was torn. I was.
Somebody at least knows what I went through. We use her for advice. What they're doing next.
He was like a very athletic young man, and just seeing him, he obviously didn't go into his surgery thinking he would end up the way he did. And I'm very fortunate that mine went so well. I just had to work so hard just to make a little progress, and it's frustrating, but it's like very inspiring. He's my biggest inspiration, I think.
For the last year, Greg Jr. and Isabella have been there for each other despite never having met until now. Come on in, baby girl.
Wow.
Greg, Isabella,
Wow.
Greg, and Greg.
Wow.
Hi.
I want you to know from our family how proud we are of you.
Thank you.
It takes a strong person to do that.
We're looking at one too.
Whatever color I'm dealt, that's a good blood, and I'm gonna make sure I win.
Wow. So yeah, that's whew. So BK actually did release a statement about this. But I want to go talk about this. So I'm looking at the lawsuit now, and there's two instances. On August 7th, 2023, athletic trainer Stanley noted that Greg was reevaluated due to an increase in symptoms upon return to practice. But this started initially on August 5th when he passed out and then began to vomit minutes later in front of his coaches and athletic trainers. Greg told his coaches and his athletic trainers that he was dizzy, had a headache, and nauseous, all of which are neurological symptoms. Upon information and belief, athletic trainer Stanley consulted with team doctor Stephen Etheridge without ever sending Greg to see Dr. Etheridge, and Greg was given Zofran for his nausea and cleared to return to practice without being referred to a specialist to rule out potentially serious neurological conditions, including brain tumors. So that's the first thing. This was the absolute wrong thing that they could have done, is that when you have things like this happen in practice and you have this on a regular basis, you got to send the kid to a doctor. You have to. And he was repeatedly concerning his neurological symptoms to the LSU coaching staff and the doctor. Owen Stanley, by the way, was a part of this. Look, this is insane. So he got reevaluated and then ruled out with a concussion with full C3 Logics. So C3 Logics is the app that they use to test head injuries. So rather than refer Greg Brooks to a competent neurologist to evaluate him, the athletic trainer instead evaluated Greg himself with an app on his iPad and again cleared him to practice despite clearly lacking the appropriate medical training and education to make a decision. They've been relying on a mobile device for this kid instead of sending him to a neurologist. That makes no sense to me. It makes no sense. So here's BK's response to everything that
remiss if I
happened.
did not address Greg Brooks Jr. and the situation that unfolded in a
Okay, here's the thing. I'm already getting a bad vibe with him because he just says, oh, Greg Brooks Jr. Just say Greg.
interview that was done on Good Morning America. There's many things I can't say because it is pending litigation, obviously. But here's what I can tell you. It is factually incorrect to state that I was not there by Greg's side through this ordeal. I was there on multiple occasions. We had somebody from my staff that was there virtually every single day. We love Greg. We love him for the person that he is, for the competitor that he is, and the battler that he is, and can only wish him continued progress as he goes through an incredibly difficult time. But it was important for me to set the record clear as to my care, my love for Greg Jr. during this very difficult time. And again, I want to be clear that any player that is part of this program, I am going to be involved in making sure that they receive the best care, the best support, and I'm part of that. So that was just extremely important for me to talk about. Look, you can question me as a football coach. You can question me in terms of the things that we do on the field, but off the field, as a parent, as a husband, as somebody that is actively involved in every community that I've been involved with, this is where the line is drawn with me. And that comment struck a nerve with me. It hit my heart because that's not why I'm in this business. I've been in it for our players. We'll always be in it for our players. And it rattled me that somebody could possibly be so factually incorrect in stating that I was not part of Greg Brooks Jr.'s care and support. And the support was the entire university, the entire community. So I needed to make sure that that record was clear.
Okay. Look, I don't know. I'm not sure about what all is going to be expected. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't really know. But I'll tell you this. The guy that performed his surgery, here is his bio, by the way. Brandon Gaynor. He is an MD board-certified neurosurgeon who graduated from the rigorous combined 6-year BA/MD program at the University of Missouri, Kansas City in 2009. Dr. Gaynor completed his residency in neurological surgery in 2016 at Miami-Jackson Memorial Hospital, where he trained under the founders of the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis, a world-renowned center for spinal cord injury and research. He specializes in adult neurosurgery, including degenerative disease of the spine, spinal stenosis, herniated cranial and spinal trauma, spine, and peripheral nerve disorders, as well as extensive experience in the surgical management of brain conditions such as a stroke, brain tumor, and subdural hematoma. Conservative care. Dr. Gaynor employs minimally invasive surgical techniques whenever possible. Dr. Gaynor has a strong clinical interest in minimally invasive spine surgery, brain, and neurological trauma. He has experience with image-guided robotic spine surgery, endoscopic lateral lumbar fusion, and minimally invasive tubular spine surgery. Okay. That's a lot. And I don't really know all that is involved in that. And honestly, I don't know, man. But I don't really know all of what is going to occur. But again, he hasn't posted anything since October of 2024, but I don't even see anything from Greg Brooks. But I don't know, man. There's a lot that was talked about during that. But I don't know, man. When Greg was transferred to Memphis for care, the coaches, athletic, and administrators at LSU knew that Brandon Gaynor had caused serious and permanent injuries during the surgery that they arranged on September the 15th of 2023, which, by the way, he didn't have the appropriate training, education, and experience. It required a craniotomy and excision, which is routinely performed by fellowship-trained pediatric neurosurgeons. His own website clearly indicates that his training, education, and experience learns from, like we saw, from spinal surgery on adults, which, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and show you the lawsuit. Oh, that's filed. We looked at the same website, guys. We looked at it, and we saw multiple things that just did not make sense. Petitioner further asserts that one of the most well-respected medical institutions in the country with ample experience in removing tumors like Greg's was ready, able, and willing to accept Greg as a patient, but defendants never advised Greg of this option until after the surgery was done and they realized he had suffered catastrophic neurological injuries. Dr. Gaynor does not have a lot of experience with the brain. He doesn't have a lot of experience with all of that. Literally, I know a part of his thing is he has it's the surgical management that he has experience in, not actual performance. He doesn't. Because let me tell you guys what surgical management is. It includes the selection of patients for surgery, performing the technical procedure of brain surgery. So he's the one that basically said, oh, we're going to do this, which was a terrible decision, obviously. This institution, St. Jude's, later agreed to accept Greg as a patient, but by then he had already suffered irreplaceable brain injury He suffered multiple strokes due to their acts of malpractice, which are being addressed in a medical review panel processing proceeding. So I don't know. It's been 3 months since this lawsuit got filed. So I don't know how long it is going to be until we get more answers as to what's going to happen. He got transferred to Memphis for care in early of October of 23. He has had no contact with any members of the coaching staff at LSU since leaving Baton Rouge. Wow. So none of them ever contacted him and said something like that. So, look, let's go ahead and let's talk. Defendants allowed Dr. Gaynor to be honored with a Go Tigers Hero Award during halftime of the LSU Florida game for his heroic efforts in treating Greg. I think I remember this too. Defendants' actions also further exacerbated Greg's considerable emotional distress. Also violated his privacy. Yeah, I'm not really worried about that one. It's really interesting, to be honest with you. Wow, this is a big one that nobody is really talking about. So the LSU defendants through the TAF, the Tiger Athletic Foundation, have also set up the equivalent of a GoFundMe page for Greg, but have refused to transfer ownership and management of this monetary fund to Greg and or his parents, such that he cannot access the funds. The defendants have insisted maintain control over this fund, have made it difficult for the petitioner to utilize funds that were raised for his sole benefit at a time where he desperately requires assistance. Okay, here's where we get into some problems. LSU was not responsible for that at that moment in time. That was for the Brooks family. When you deal with injuries like that, sure, the school can be involved somewhat. But when you're talking about the transfer of something like that needs to go exclusively to the parents and to the family itself. The school does not need to be involved with that. That was ridiculous. So it is ridiculous. He should have never been playing throughout that game. I don't know, man. So, again, we'll see what happens at the end of the day with all this lawsuit. I do hope that something does eventually come of this because I love Greg. I thought he was an amazing human being. I always thought very highly of Greg. Something needs to change. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to have a real intro video. We're going to end it on that note. Something has to change. Something has to change. Especially in the medical industry. This better send a signal to every athletic facility, whether it be as a P4 ranking or anything else. Use this as an example for the future so that you can avoid things like this. So, guys, thank you all for joining Inside the Huddle. We will see you tomorrow. We got a great show planned out for – actually, we won't have a show tomorrow. So we'll have a show for you, I think, Friday night. We'll see if we can get a show there. But until next time, guys, y'all have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you once again